Mm. Mm. Hey y'all, welcome to the Devon A. Morris Unfiltered Call-In Show. Have a seat. Let's get ready. You have any questions? Come on, call in. Come on to that Discord channel. Do me a favor, get the unfiltered crew some finger snaps. We're ready to get started here. Mondays, 8 p.m. Every single Monday, we're here. I'm excited about it. Are you? Let's get this show started, y'all. The greatest Scrum show on earth. I'll see y'all soon. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. How you doing? Let me throw some applause out there. Welcome. I'm back in the studio, y'all. Yeah, I'm back in the studio. If you don't know me, my name is Devon Morris. You're on the Unfiltered Show where we talk about Agile, Scrum, entrepreneurship, those kind of things, right? We answer your actual questions. So come on in, come and join us, take a seat, come on and relax, get your favorite beverage, whatever it is that you do. Come on and join us. Let's have some fun here. And here's the deal. This is how it works, right? First off, we start off with just simply going through this intro, and then we'll go ahead and talk about the topic. And tonight's topic is the cardinal sins of a Scrum Master, like the worst things you can do. That's what we're talking about today. So this should be a good topic. I'm looking forward to this one because I see these things. Maybe I've done a couple of these things. Hopefully, I have never done them, right? But the idea is that's what we're going to talk about today. Once we talk about that topic, we normally go at that topic about 10, 15 minutes, maybe 25 to 30 minutes after the hour. And then we open up the floor for your questions where you can actually go ahead and join us on the show by phoning in, calling in digitally, right? You can join us live on the interview and be right over here or right over here, depending on what side I put you on, right? Or, right, you're welcome to drop your stuff in the chat, any questions that you may have. So do me a favor, everybody that's here, whether you're on LinkedIn or you're out here on YouTube, say hi. Just say hi, wave at me a little bit. Let me know that you're here, right? So I can give you a shout out as we continue to go through this. What's going on, at least for me? I got an ACSM going on, life events happening. So I'm looking forward to those things. But man, I'm just having a good time, y'all. I really am. I really am. I'm like getting into this, what I feel the season time of all the kids being gone and being able to live the life that I choose to live, right? So I'm actually loving it. I'm loving every minute of it, right? Between working with clients, doing classes, just enjoying every minute of it, back to traveling different places. So I'm just kind of like, oh, this is amazing. This is great. Trying to live, just trying to enjoy life. That's all it really is for me. Actually, I forgot that I can even raise my desk in this studio, right? Because I can raise the desk lower, so I'm actually standing up, which I love standing up as I'm talking to you. It gives me a different type of energy, right? But what else is going on? Other than that, everything's just cool, man. Everything's just good, man. So tell me what's going on with you all. How have you been? How's your week started out so far, right? How were things for you last week? Did you have an amazing weekend? I hope you had an amazing weekend. I hope you're doing great things. If you're not doing great things, then change that. Man, we about to get into 2024. Like it's literally halfway through September. Like for real. We're on the other side of the year, right? So man, you need to start preparing for next year and start getting yourself ready to go max it once again. I got Siri over here turning on for me. I don't know why, but it's just turning on. So I'm getting rid of that. But other than that, man, it's just good. It's just really, really good, at least for my part, right? So you all know we got the Bankable Breakthrough event coming October 26th, 27th and 28th. So 3 days full of fun. I'll give you more information about that next week. But just want to mention it today. What else is going on? That's really fundamentally it. So just feeling good. Um, and just got a lot of things to work through with several people. But I love this. I love what I do, right? I love what I do because it gives me an opportunity to connect with people, right? Connect with people on many, many levels. And I just love the conversations, the ideas, the exchanges that happen between me and others. So whether you're on LinkedIn, whether you're on YouTube, go ahead and drop something. And we will go ahead and talk to you after we talk to this topic. and see where everybody's at, see how things are going for everybody that's around. All right, so here's the deal. We're 5 minutes after. We'll go ahead and jump into the topic, right? This is an interesting topic, right? I had to think about how to name this. I was gonna say the worst things that a Scrum Master can do, but really the cardinal sins of a Scrum Master, and really this is about what not to do, right? And we're gonna go through these. I don't have them in particular order. I'm not ranking them. I just kind of wrote down some ideas on what I think on, some of my trusted notes, right? So here's the deal. When I think about the Scrum Master role, the Scrum Master's job is to ensure like the smoothest operation of the Scrum team. It's almost like to pave the way to make everybody else's job easier. And when I say Scrum team, I'm talking about the product owner, developers, but I also want to include, as a side note to that, the actual organization, right? Because the organization, you want to make things as smooth as possible for the organization, because the objective is to be able to get things out that the user ultimately loves in the most efficient way that we possibly can. And you can do that in many different ways, right? And so there are best practices that a Scrum Master should follow. But sometimes we fall short of that. Sometimes we hit certain pitfalls that we should avoid in some kind of way, but we don't always avoid those pitfalls. So we're gonna dive into or jump into some of those actual things that you should think about, or if you see them, you know that it's a problem, you know that you got to find ways to deal with it, right? So number one on the list is to a Scrum Master that kind of ignores the Scrum values. Okay, you know, it's a thing when you have somebody that don't understand what they're doing, right? When you don't understand the Scrum framework, how can you hold anybody else accountable to the Scrum framework? But if you just put the framework to the side, the Scrum values is probably what I'm more worried about versus anything else. And if you don't know what the Scrum values are, just think about force, right? So focus, openness, respect, commitment, extreme courage. Take the extreme off the courage part. It's only courage, right? You should be embodying the Scrum values in your everyday actions and behaviors, right? Because the best way for you to actually promote the values is to show that you embody those values. The more you embody those values, the easier it's going to be for people to follow your example. The easier it's going to be, right? So it's easy for us to ignore the Scrum values because we get wrapped up in the framework. We get wrapped up in the day-to-day activities that we do as a Scrum Master, and we don't think about those values at all. Now, I got several Scrum Masters this here, right? Throw in the chat and tell me, have you been a victim of forgetting about, or just have you forgot about the Scrum values? Because I can tell you early on, I don't remember the Scrum values, right? And it's not something that I would kind of pay much attention to, right? Sometimes it's a little hard having courage when everybody else is moving in a different direction. Sometimes it's really hard to have a stakeholder that has a really high position in the organization, and you got to tell them something that's not right in terms of what they're doing, right? So being able to kind of live and breathe the values, those Scrum values, and make sure you don't ignore them is extremely important. So one of the cardinal sins is ignoring the Scrum values, right? The second one on my list that I absolutely love is, and you kind of see this one, especially when people use burn charts, when people use data in the wrong way, right? Or you see people who don't have really good facilitation skills, don't really know how to influence the team to do the things that the team needs to do. And so you will see number two way more often than we should. And that is micromanaging the team. Okay? The thing that's ridiculous, right, is that one of the things that we're trying to do is create self-organizing teams, right? We're working to create self-organizing teams. And creating self-organizing teams, when you start to micromanage them, you actually undermine, you stifle their ability to self-organize. And really two things that you stifle is going to be creativity, right? So you'll stifle that. But the one that I see most often that you stifle is autonomy. And autonomy is interesting, right? Because if you think about autonomy, autonomy is a precursor for both motivation and psychological safety, right? So if you say to yourself, the moment you start micromanaging people, right, is the moment that you start pulling at that psychological safety, that motivation, because you're removing or impacting their autonomy, right? So micromanagement would be the one that I probably see the most often, especially from people who just are given the role, like they was doing something else and they were just given the role, and they weren't good at doing this type of work in the first place, right? And so I'll be the cardinal sin is micromanaging teams, right? Micromanaging people. You don't want to do that, right? Number three is when you forget about the various styles of leadership that you should be using for knowledge workers. Now, the three that I'm going to say to you that are classic in terms of what you need for knowledge workers is going to be servant leadership, transformational leadership, and adaptive leadership. Now, over the years, the only thing that we talked about in terms of Scrum was servant leadership. Finding ways to serve the needs of others, right? Helping to remove obstacles, right? Ensuring that the team has everything that it needs as it moves forward down this path of delivering whatever it's going to deliver. Being a team that has an unbelievable amount of harmony is what you're trying to do, right? But servant leadership has been one of those things that's been a little fuzzy in terms of definition over the years. However, over the years, we've also seen more other kind of leadership being placed upon a Scrum Master or being exhibited by the Scrum Master, like transformational leadership and adaptive leadership. So those are topics that I would love to go deeper about at some point, but they're definitely things that you need as a Scrum Master to kind of move forward. So when you decide to ignore servant leadership, adaptive leadership, and transformational leadership, you're probably going to have some additional problems, right? In terms of people wanting to follow the direction that you're influencing them. Because remember, you don't have authority to make anybody do anything as a Scrum Master, right? Number four, right? The fourth cardinal sin is an inability to protect the team, to shield the team. So one of the things that we say about the sprint, one of the characteristics of a sprint is that the sprint is protected, right? We get into a sprint backlog, we make a commitment, we don't change that commitment, right? I mean, anything could change, in a non-ideal world, but ideally we don't change it. And so once that team is getting there and they're doing that work, they need the Scrum Master to deal with those external influences. I'm not considering the product owner to be an external influence, right? I consider the product owner to work with the team on a daily basis, right? But when you have stakeholders that don't know how to work with teams, when you have other outsiders that don't know how to work with teams, and then they're like, okay, this was the person I always work with, let me go directly to them. No. The team made a commitment. So it's my job as a Scrum Master to make sure that I protect that team. So and then they can be productive and it doesn't impact their morale. Does that make sense? Doesn't impact their morale. Okay? That's what I want to see. I want to see things like that. Number five, the fifth cardinal sin of a Scrum Master is avoiding conflict. Avoiding conflict. This is a toughie, right? Because, a lot of people don't run to conflict, right? We try to avoid it. We try to suppress it. We try not to deal with whatever the issue is at hand, right? But as a Scrum Master, you need to find healthy ways to resolve conflict. You just need to. You can't really get around it, right? Because, life is about negotiation, right? You think about it, sprint planning is what? A negotiation. When two people are having conversations, it's a negotiation. When you're negotiating your salary, it's a negotiation, right? Life is about micro negotiations toward much larger negotiations, right? And many times it's going to lead to some conflict. But if you're avoiding it, if you're avoiding conflict, it's a bigger problem because people need you to be that example, to be the one that can find healthy ways to resolve conflict, right? We need that from you, right? So, number six, and I've actually seen this one, which is ridiculous, right? Um, have you ever seen a Scrum Master that wasn't able to adapt to change? Now, understand the Scrum Master is classically supposed to be a change agent, right? But a Scrum Master that's resistant to change, and resistance being the most normal thing that you're going to exist in terms of change, um, that Scrum Master that doesn't embrace change, that Scrum Master that's want to hold to the old culture that exists, right? That Scrum Master is a hindrance. They are blocking your progress, right? And if there's one person you want to be kind of moving in this direction, it's going to be the actual Scrum Master. I don't, I've seen a few Scrum Masters that just not good with change, just not. And it's like, what the heck do you do about that? But it's a cardinal sin. Number seven, I saw this one like in '07. I saw this one when I met somebody in '07, and I came back and again worked with them in 2011. I saw this one, right? And what it was, Cardinal Sin number seven is a Scrum Master that does not invest in continuously learning. A Scrum Master that does not invest in continuously learning. At minimum, every couple of years you should read the Scrum Guide. Minimum, right? Because Scrum evolves and Agile evolves in general, right? Other frameworks have changes that happen to them over time, right? And when you don't know and you haven't studied, that means you're not ready for new challenges that may have arisen, right? You're not prepared to even prioritize your learning as important, right? That means that wherever you are when you stop learning, you're going to be right there stagnant, not moving, not moving. And you're going to have people that's growing around you, right? And then you're not going to have much to offer them but the things you always have offered them before. And that's not what you want as a Scrum Master. You want to there's always new knowledge out there. It's always easy to read a book to get the knowledge of things that you can try or learn or how to deal with confrontation, for example. Good techniques for that stuff, right? I was talking to my class earlier about crucial confrontations and crucial conversations, right? Because they was asking about how to deal with that. And I remember reading those books to help me in terms of how I thought about things. And these are things that you need to do. But if you're the Scrum Master that's not willing to learn, and I remember seeing that guy in 2007 and then seeing him in 2011 and realized that nothing had changed about him. Nothing. Nothing changed about him. I mean, I grew leaps and bounds and nothing changed about him, right? That's number seven. Okay. Let's see. Woo, man. All right. So number eight, one thing you shouldn't do is commit a team to work, right? There's a certain way that you facilitate so you don't actually commit a team to work. But it's even worse when you overcommit the team to work. Like, committing a team to work, many team members will, okay, all right, this is our Scrum Master. We love the person. They're kind of all right. But when you overcommit the team to work, you know, a lot of times us as Scrum Masters, we have the people outside of the actual Scrum team that are applying pressure, that are saying we need to get certain things done. They're saying we need to act and behave certain ways, right? That pressure on you could cause you to do things that you would not normally do. And one of those things is commit the team, but the cardinal sin of all cardinal sins is to overcommit that team to work. That's going to damage your relationship with the team. That's going to damage the team's relationship with the stakeholders. And then, ultimately, it's going to come back and hit you. It's going to hit you dead smack in the face, right? So don't do that, right? That's number 8, overcommitting the team. Number 9, no retros. You know, every single one of you all have experienced this, right? Where you just stop having the actual event of retrospectives, right? It's one thing where you don't have the review, right? You know, there could be logical reasons why you don't have the review. You might be building in a certain way where you don't see any value or waiting to get enough value so you can show it to folks. You know, I get that, right? I understand that. But the retrospective, right? It's something where you don't need any additional help from outsiders, right? And so you miss opportunities for improvement when you decide to skip the retrospective. That's not something that you want to do. Okay. So I see it all the time. I'm not, it doesn't even surprise me anymore, especially when it comes down to me having classes and newer Scrum Masters, just like the team said we don't want to do it. Yeah, the team is perfect, right? They don't have anything to improve on. Okay. All right. I've heard that before. So hey, have your retrospectives, right? Don't neglect those retrospectives. Number 10, this will be the last one, right? Um, you know how people have favorites? You know, people have favorites, right? When you actually have a favorite, and when I say a person that you favor over others, or people that you favor over others for whatever reason, right? Um, it, it kind of puts people in a position where they don't feel that you can be impartial about a decision, um, or something else that needs to be done, right? And if you've experienced this before, you know you don't tend to go to that person that's favoring other people because you're likely not going to win whatever battle it is. Okay. And so playing favorites is not something that you want to do either. Okay. And so I listed 10 items here in no particular order. I'm going to go through them backwards. But here's my question for you all here. I want you to put in the comments which, if you had to rank the top 3 that I gave you, what would the top 3 cardinal sins be? Right? What would the top 3 cardinal sins be? Right? And I don't mention them again, but I just want you to just do me a favor. Just type it in the comments, right? What do you think the top 3 cardinal sins are, right? Type that in the chat for me. Let me go through them again, and I'll go backwards. Favorites, you watch that, okay? Playing favorites definitely is a cardinal sin. When you think about retrospectives, not having retrospectives, cardinal sin. Committing the team, but over committing the 10 is an absolute cardinal sin, right? Not investing in your own learning, right? You should be learning, you should be growing. You're not a change agent. You're not adapting to change, you're resistant to change. That sucks, right? You are running from conflict, you're avoiding conflict. That sucks. People expect you to be a little braver than that. If anybody's going to take the risk, people expect the Scrum Master to take the risk, right? You're not shielding the team, you're not protecting the team. That's another one of those cardinal sins. Not being a servant leader, adaptive leader, transformational leader. Start off with servant leadership first, build on the rest, right? Micromanaging people, the team, right? Don't do that. And ignoring the Scrum values. We tend to know all the other elements of Scrum, but we tend to ignore the Scrum values. A lot of us do that on a really regular basis, right? If I was to think about those top 10, those 10, and it's not a top 10, which ones are the ones that's probably the most impactful to me? I would say forget continuous learning because that only impacts me. Probably the one that works my nerves and grades my nerves the most is micromanagement. Is micromanagement. You know, when you see people being micromanaged, you just get a different something from them. You know, especially when things are not going so well, you just get a different set of reactions from them, right? And you got to be careful about that because for me, when I look at it and I see it, being a past developer, you know, I mean, forgive it. Right now, I don't want anybody micromanaging me. Like, I just don't at all. I don't want anybody micromanage me at all. Okay. Um, and so I see people throwing a few things in the comments, but I'll add this to make sure we're good, right? Well, before I do that, you know, make sure you like, subscribe, click the notification button if you've never been here before. A lot of you all probably have already done that, so please do that. It helps the channel out a lot. Let me take a look at the comments, right? Real quick, right? I see, you know, not following Scrum values, number one. Yeah, number two, micromanaging the team and not giving them autonomy. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure if you're just writing the list out. Servant leadership has gotten taken out of the Scrum guide. We agree, right? They look at other things, right? Beyond servant leadership. So I had Leon really talk about that. And if you read the Scrum Guide, you will see servant leadership a lot less, but you will still see that people call a Scrum Master a servant leader, even though it's not necessarily a Scrum Guide like that, right? So you see adaptive leadership, you see other forms of leadership taking precedence, but it may be 11 Scrum Guides, probably 10 of them say servant leadership in them, out of the past ones, right? But the most recent one, it's less so, right? Let's see. Let's see. I see Patrick. What's going on, Patrick? How you doing? Playing favorites. This one is a toughie, right? Because you might know people. Um, you might know somebody and be close to somebody. And man, sometimes it can be tough to not play favorites, right? Especially, when you know there's some people who don't have other people's best interests in mind, right? I see Ali, right? True leadership. That's what you'll see in a Scrum Guide. True leadership. The words true leadership. I can't show the folks on LinkedIn over on YouTube. I'm gonna just type you in the chat. So true leadership. That's what you'll see more in the Scrum Guide today. But again, true leadership has been something that when it first was written, people still got a lot of questions about it, right? Um, what else? What else? So, it's just one of those things where it's like when you see these things, well, hopefully you're not one of the people that actually has this problem, right? Or has any of these problems, right? We hope that isn't the case. But they're not hard to solve, right? They're really not hard to solve. Probably the hardest one on that list to solve for me is going to be probably conflict resolution. Dealing with conflicts, right? Avoiding conflicts, right? Sometimes, even me personally, I just don't feel like fighting with people. If I'm being honest with you, I just don't feel like fighting with people, right? Um, and then to fight with people you have positions of power. Sometimes it just isn't fruitful. Sometimes it just doesn't work because you don't have the power that they have, and you give them all the ideas on the planet, and it just doesn't work, right? It just doesn't. They don't want to listen. So that's definitely what it is. And then you see Sharon says overcommitting the team. Yeah, committing the team should be a problem. Overcommitting the team, killer, right? Micromanaging the team, no retrospective. Probably what I see more often, and then the one I hate the most is micromanagement. The one I see way too often is retrospectives, no retrospectives. I mean, if if I was just to take a regular CSM class, right, and there was 10 people in a CSM class, 6 to 7 of those people normally have a problem with their retrospective. Um, 6 to 7 of them normally, right? In a 10-person CSM class, 6 to 7 people normally having issues with retrospectives, and normally are not having them on a regular cadence, right? I would say of those people, probably 50% of them aren't having a retrospective at all. So I say 3 to 4 aren't having a retrospective at all, right? And some are shocked that you're supposed to have it every single sprint. So it just becomes one of those things that you got to deal with. You have to correct in some kind of way. Um, so that's we're gonna leave that at that, right? So I think we're good to go. So once again, those are the 10 cardinal sins when it comes down to being that great Scrum Master. I mentioned them. You can always go back to this video and look a little bit more because we always keep this live. But let's go ahead and shut down that topic. It's almost 8:30. I want to go ahead and open up the floor for what questions that you have. If you have any questions, you are welcome to type those questions in the chat. I'll go ahead and pull them up and we'll talk about them. The other way that will take precedence over that is if you want to join the show, right? There are people that come in, they join the show, and then they ask questions right on the show live, and we have an exchange. If you have one of those super deep questions, then I would advise you to join the show. It will allow me to have an exchange with you, and that exchange would be very, very important because sometimes just the words you type, I just don't get enough out of that, right? So as we talk about that, let's talk about what's happening over the next 3 weeks in terms of the show. Next week, we're gonna talk about soft skills that pay the bills. I promised that topic a while ago. We're going to talk about soft skills that pay the bills next week. And then after that, we're not going to be live for 2 weeks. I'm going to make sure I get a video out each one of those weeks, but we're not going to be live for 2 weeks because I got to go on vacation, right? So I got to go on vacation. So I'm going to go on vacation and, spend a little bit of time away. I'm going to be in places where I probably won't have good access to internet, right? Um, at least sporadically. And I don't want to risk thinking I can do the show when doing the show takes a lot of good bandwidth, right? And so I can't guarantee I'm going to have that. So that means next week we'll be here. The 2 weeks after that, we won't, and then we'll get back to our regular cadence every Monday like we should. But you will get videos each one of those weeks, okay? So just know that. So that being said, any questions, please drop them in the chat, or you're welcome to join the show. I drop the links. I'll drop the links out there. While we're doing that, while people are thinking about their questions, let me say hi to folks that are here. Hello, Rajiv. How you doing? How's life treating you, man? Rajiv has helped me out with the class earlier today, so that's always a great thing. Let me pull that up a little bit. Let's see, Elsie, how's it going? Hopefully things are going good for you. Things are great for me. So hi, welcome to the show. Thank you so much. Fabian, how's it going? Mr. There you go. Let's see. Miss White, love you. How you doing? Patrick's always around. Miss Moses, Sharon, how you doing? Always good to see you. Let's see. Then I have, let's see, long and winded question, Devon. Well, hey, I suppose to throw out some long and winded questions sometimes. Try to make sure we make things happen. That's the spice of life, isn't it? I'll say hey to Leon, AI Lee, how you doing? So they threw comments over there on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, so that's a good thing. I have somebody that's going to join us, so let's go ahead and start getting this thing ready to go real quick. So let me grab this and bring the person on the show. So give me just a second so I can get. I got a couple of templates, so give me a second so I can get this right. Let's go ahead and do that, and then I got to switch this over. So just give me a second because that didn't go. Let's go there. Hey, how you doing there? Can't hear you, so make sure you unmute yourself. Make sure you unmute yourself. Let's see. At least I can see my volumes are up. So Brian, you there? I see you here. I can't hear you though. Let me go ahead and see if there's something going on over here. I got you up here. It says you're muted. Guest has muted themselves. That's what it says. So make sure you unmute yourself. Okay. I'll give you a second to come on in, man. It still says guest has muted themselves. While Brian is getting that together. There you go. I can hear you now, man.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
All right. Is it an echo or are we good, Yvonne?
There's a little diddy 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 happen in the background a little bit, but I think you're good.
Okay. Okay. Man, appreciate you taking my question. First of all, I always
Yeah, no
enjoy the
problem.
show when I can join. Absolutely. So let me get to it. So
Okay.
I'm in the role of a project manager.
Mm-hmm.
I have three delivery projects, and we're going to have work sets that are coming from 3 to 5 different teams.
Mm-hmm.
My concern is traceability. and the like who manages all those scrum teams, right? Who I don't know who's going to be the bigger scrum, so to
Okay.
speak, master, and all of that. Just looking for some advice, man, some suggestions from the guru.
Well, well, let me ask a couple questions, right? So my first question for you is your okay, you went out. Wherever
Did I
that
go
mic
out?
was at, yeah, you went out.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay,
Okay, great. So here's the deal. Let me ask you a couple questions, right? Um, First question is it's three scrum teams, right? So
correct.
what is their definition of dones across the teams?
So each one of those guys, and we're still gathering business requirements. We're still
Hmm.
solidifying the team. So some of that
Hmm.
done, they consider done, is to be determined on some of those teams.
Okay.
What? So that's let me answer. That's the answer to your question.
Okay. So one of the things that I would do is when you have multiple teams that are working with a product that has something in common. So product increment that's the same across two or three teams. Your definitions of done have to be in common, shared definitions of done. So if you have handoffs that happen between those teams, then it has to be somebody's definition of done is somebody else's definition of ready, right? Somebody's other definition of done is somebody else's definition of ready, right? Then they have their definition of done. In a perfect world, each team would have a definition of done that would be potentially shippable going all the way to prod, right? If you have a definition of done for each team that goes all the way to prod, you're in a perfect position because now you're combining requirements per se, if that makes sense, right? Instead of
Yes.
combining through the life cycle. So that would require that you work with the powers that be, because I'm assuming that you don't have the power to put the teams together. You work with the powers that be and ask them, how are you going to structure these teams? Are you giving us teams that have all the skills that we need, hopefully to be potentially shippable? Hopefully to be potentially shippable. But if that's not the case and you're not getting that, then what are you going to have on each one of those teams is going to have a huge impact on where you need to combine and the various dependencies that would exist amongst those teams. And you have to remember something, Brian, that's really, really important. Many of the dependencies that you have, especially when you have to have handoffs and communication that happens between teams, all that work is non-value add but necessary, which means the more that stuff you do, the less time you have for the value add activities. So you got to be really careful because what happens is your each team is like a separate team. But if they have to communicate with each other all the time, then you have one big team. And one big team means the lines of communication are crossing the same way as if you had established them as one team. But you got three teams that have to act as one team. And the number one reason why large efforts fail is lines of communication. And so you try to find ways to limit those lines of communication by having those self sufficient, self organizing, cross functional teams that can deliver independent of each other. So if you can have some influence into that, I think that would have a tremendous impact on the amount of communication that's needed across teams, the dependencies that exist across teams. And I've worked with teams that had a lot of dependencies, and organizing the dependencies, man, is troublesome. It's troublesome, right? Because that's just additional legwork. Hmm?
Who does that fall on the PM to track those depend? I mean, I track dependencies at the project level, but
Yeah,
who does that fall on to track the dependencies that are for all these multiple teams? Does that essentially fall on me as well?
it very well could because who else is it going to fall onto, right? And it's going to fall, it will likely fall on you and the Scrum Master because what happens when nobody else jumps up to do the job, they say, hey, project manager, hey, Scrum Master, here's a job you should do. So
Yeah.
if it's not already defined on who's going to do that, then it's probably going to be you, man. You know,
Okay. Okay.
I'm not, and I'm not trying to, say that's what it should be. Because technical dependency should be on the developers. Product related dependency should be the product owners communicating, right? The Scrum Master should be dealing with impediments, right? And so if those things exist, if and you're a project manager and you're working with all these teams, many of these things will probably fall on you as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you gotta start having conversations around the structure of the teams. What type of requirements are coming in? What does that mean for the type of skill sets that you need to have? What those lines of communication are going to be. You have to start thinking about those things because now you're thinking about scaling. And do you want to scale teams of teams, or do you want to really have one big team, even though you call them three smaller teams?
I never thought about one big team. I never thought about it in that sense. Speaking with the uh, speaking with the tech lead today, Devon, uh,
Yeah.
got a crew that's going to be split. So he's got let's just say 12 individuals on the crew.
Okay.
That crew is going to dedicate some of their time is going to be allocated to my delivery project. Some of their time is going to be dedicated to another delivery project that has nothing to do with my project.
So you're only getting
You know?
50% of their time, which means you're going to lose something to context switching, right? So that's
Yeah.
already another problem, right? And so let's just say you only got 50% of their time. Let's assume that 10% of that time is gone. So out of an average 20-hour week, you're probably going to lose 2 to 4 hours, right? So now when you think about these teams as doing work for you, you think about them having 12 to 16 hours of available time to do for you a week. So those are things that you may not have no choice in dealing with, but you just make the adjustments to deal with it accordingly. So and then you'll be okay, right? And so for me, am I going to worry about that as much? I probably don't have no control over that one, right? And so now you got to ask yourself, what do you actually have control over? What can you influence as well? Because we have spheres of influence, right? And so you got to think about what you can influence as well. And I want to make sure we make a distinction here. I'm not saying go have one big team. But I am saying if you have three scrum teams that have to always talk to each other, that's really one big team.
Even if
Even
it's
though
not
we,
on that's one big team, if their
yeah,
Jira board doesn't say they have different Jira boards, it's still
they can have
essentially
they can have different Jira boards. But if they have to always communicate with each other, tell me that's not one big team. Think of it this way, right? Imagine if I had three families that live in three separate houses, but every day, 10 times a day, these three families had to communicate with each other. Wouldn't most people think of them as one big family?
facts. Absolutely.
Even though they live in separate houses, and you can have three separate Jira boards. But if you have to have a lot of communication that happens, you know what that's going to add? Overhead, overhead, overhead,
Yeah.
overhead. Because the communication likely is not going to be talking. The communication is going to be, how can we show accountability through Jira that this person is supposed to do that? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a dependency for this team, and then they have to plan that in their sprints, right? Oh, I already planned my sprint. I can't plan that in this sprint. You're going to have to wait for that in the next sprint. You have a lot of that stuff happen.
Yeah. For the ones that are already added to the project, Devon, it's already happened.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
so it's just my thing, my plan of action that I've actually had. We're about six weeks too late. The problem obviously is, well, I haven't told you, but our program group designed this project and it's set
Uh-huh.
up wrong. So we're kind of in a rabbit hole from my perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to do now is get everyone in the same room from a finance perspective, from a business perspective, and the tech from a tech perspective to say, how are you delivering? What are you delivering? What is this crew delivering? Like you
Okay.
said,
Yeah,
I didn't refer to it as definition of done. I just
yeah.
said when can they transition to the next point is kind of how I played it. But
Yeah, and in Agile, those are, your handoff points is when I finish my work as a team. What does finish look like for us? And that's your definition of done is that agreed upon completeness, right? But that agreed upon completeness, somebody else grabs it. And so whatever I need in terms of my grab, that's my definition of ready. Your definition of done and their definition of ready gotta match, otherwise there's a gap.
okay. Can I ask you one
Right?
last thing, and then I'll
No,
let
no,
you?
you
Is
you
that
good,
okay?
man. You good. We got time. Go ahead.
Okay. So my last thing is the way it's structured now. I will be asking my crews to do work on the back end for traceability purposes. I want to eliminate right now as much work on the crews as possible. What would
Hmm.
you How can I make it easy for my crews to just be able to focus on the work that needs to be delivered?
Here's a question. What is it that management needs? Because traceability will be about what management needs and the organization deems that it needs, right? Because all they're really trying to do with a lot of traceability is either meet something that's audible or meet something that's being asked for by somebody else, right? And so if you figure out what they need and get to the essence of what they need, then you can find ways you can naturally meet those things in the way that they do their work currently.
Okay. Yeah.
Does that make
So
sense?
so we're on absolutely because we're dealing with what we call our change group, the people who write part of our PMO. It's a
Yeah.
regulatory project. So there's two different needs here that we have to make sure that we adhere to. So yeah, you hit it right on
And
the nose.
and
And I will
and and
both of them.
here's the deal, right? You have to remember that regulatory, a lot of that stuff comes from some entity that is not a part of the company. But they will give you a regulatory item, but they give another company, your competition, the same regulatory item. And you two companies don't solve that requirement exactly the same way. So there's
Mhm.
likely multiple ways to meet a requirement. You have to be able to meet many of those requirements, as many as you can, in the natural way that you perform your work. Does that make sense? And
Oh yeah, that's
so it's like this, I've been in places where one of the audible items would be some type of test plan, but test plan has never been nothing for me, right? And so I'd rather meet that with real testing. So then the question becomes, do I really want a test plan, or do I want to meet a certain level of testing coverage? Do I want to be able to show that we have a certain amount of automation that's occurring? Would that be a better way? Because that means I'm testing a whole lot versus just planning test, right? And so, that can meet that need for saying the test plan is trying to say, we want to see that you're going to execute testing. Well, what if I show you I am executing testing? Which one is better, the plan for execution or what we've executed? Which one's better, right?
yeah.
And so it becomes the essence of what they need. They want to make sure tests are happening. Well, I'm making sure in this way, not in that other way. And it's things like that you will need to think about to try to address. So, and then your team doesn't have to do additional paperwork, additional work. That makes sense, right? And so now you
Absolutely.
got to start thinking about those different ways to kind of tackle that problem. And there's always more than one way to skin the problem. And you have to find the best way for you to skin the problem. And then the other thing is, don't do this by yourself, man. There are other brains there. You obviously got some Scrum Masters there as well. There's probably some other Agile folks around. Get them in a room and say, let's talk about this. I got a problem here. What do you all think? What have you seen? What have you experienced, right? We got this thing over here, and the essence of what the exec needs is they need to answer, they need this thing to make these decisions over here. Can we
Now,
find a way to get them this information naturally in the way that the team works that is going to give them this result over here or give them this data over here so they can make a decision? The thing that you just want to be careful about, Brian, is you don't want to turn the situation into it's a us against everybody else, right? You need your executives, you need your supervisors, you need them to do a lot of blocking and tackling for you, right? Because them blocking and tackling for you is going to make everybody else's job easier. If they're not blocking and tackling for you, they're now a part of the defense trying to tackle you, and that's going to slow you down. So you want to be really careful in terms of this, and it becomes something that's hard to navigate. And I'd be looking at, some of the biggest naysayers and seeing where they see problems at, and you get them on board, you get them moving in a direction with you, and then it'd be easier to get other people to move in a direction with you, because the biggest game that you're really going to play in all this is likely going to be the political game, dealing with everybody else, with everybody's different kingdoms. And so you can't forget that either, because if you mess with somebody's kingdom, then they're just going to go to war with you.
Yeah.
So you're gonna be really careful about that. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's not, you know, that's just political capital, right? That's not something that you can, there's not an agile tool for that, a technique for that, right? That's just relationships at that point, and that will become a part of that. It's almost like you have to do that normal project management thing, right? Where you build relationships to a place where this is an emergency. You go around all the processes and you get to the people that you know to get the work done. You get the people to get shit done, and you grab those people, and then you go and you get it done. That's what you're going to have to make sure you have those kind of, and that's how you're going to have to navigate this. And then you want to think about those handoffs. You want to think about how things happen between these teams. You want to think about the different subject matter expertise that the team will not have. Because I'm assuming that there'll be some things that are not a part of your team. You just told me about a whole team of architects, and they got 50% of their time dedicated toward this effort. That says to me they're owned by something else, and that skill's not on the team. So then there's likely other skills that's not on the team. So then what are those other skills that's not on the team? If, for example, that skill's not on the team, is the deploying skill, the database skills, are those on the team as well? What else isn't on the team? And this is where creating those definitions of done are extremely important, because when I create a definition of done, we brainstorm, we figure out all of the activities that we need to do to ship something, all of the activities, and then we actually sort those activities, consolidate them, so and then we get rid of things that's alike. And then based on the skill set of developers, we know where down that path we stop. You know that there's likely going to be a done and a done. There might be a done to done for you. So figure out where people's skills stop. And if there's handoffs, you can figure out, okay, well, there's a gap between this definition done, that definition ready, that handoff right there. We need to solve this problem. Okay, we see a gap over here. We need to solve this problem. We know that this person's skill is going to be needed. How do we pull them in early, and how much lead time do they need to get something done? It's just all these different things you're going to have to think about, and you want to just put yourself in a position where you're paving the way for the team. I mean, it's almost like I want to make the lives of my children easier by just paving the way to make it easy as possible for them, right? And you have to start thinking about how you're going to do that across each one of these teams so they can deliver. And one of the best ways to do that is to say to yourself, if this was an emergency, what would we do if we had to turn around this feature, this requirement, in 24 hours? Because
Mm.
that's when you get rid of the fluff, when you start thinking about it from an emergency standpoint. And trust me, in an emergency, people can deliver exactly what needs to be delivered, but they get rid of all the fluff, man. And when you know this is what you need and only that to deliver, everything else is non-value add but necessary, and you can try to reduce that stuff as much as possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
you got some work ahead of you for sure. But I don't think it's not. I don't think it's. I don't think it's not anything that you can't solve. It's going to be a heck of a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of pain. But it's only going to be a lot of pain because of the handoffs. But you can find ways to make that load a little bit lighter.
Yeah. You hit it right on the nose. The handoffs are what it's going to be the biggest thing, because we got systems that need to be stood up and work sets that need to be completed before the next team can move over. So if this team, let's just say, is late by even 9 days because we have a hard delivery date, um, it could cause if it could cause some issues down the line, right? So
Well,
just really
here's a
communicate.
question for you, right? So here's a question for you, right? You know, a data set is a bunch of data, groups of data, right? So let's just say you had a requirement that needed to be fulfilled by the end, right? What if you started trying to think to yourself, what are the only things that I need in that data set to fulfill that requirement? You got to get people out of the all or nothing, even in your data sets, because those data sets are going to change. Those data sets are going to be updated, right? You're not going to
Yeah,
have perfect data sets coming out initially. So,
right.
if, for example, in a data set you needed, something that expressed the color about something, and you needed that for the requirement, but you needed nothing else in that data set but that one thing that expressed the color about something. Isn't that the only thing that you need to build from the agile perspective to get that requirement to done and get everybody what they need in the chain? It does mean people can complain about something. I have to touch that data set more than one time. I'm spending more time on that data set. But the benefit is that you spend more time on that data set to deliver something to the users much faster. And it's not necessarily to deliver it so you can get feedback sooner. That feedback sooner is going to be what's going to give you the advantage that you need. And so you will know, hey, you know what? Yeah, we included that color thing, but it was missing, fuchsia. It
Yeah.
was missing fuchsia, and we know it's missing fuchsia because it's down there. Now we know that early on, and we make an adjustment to that part of the data set. And then we extend that data set or add to that data set, right? And if you think about that through everything, right? I got a requirement that needs to deliver. What do I need, and what are the only things that I need for that requirement? Like it was the only thing that we're delivering. And again, you do have to have architects that can think in a way that's more agile, that's building things where it can be extended, it can be built upon. You're not painting yourself in a corner. You do have to do things like that for sure. But the idea is that it can be done. And if you think about that one piece flow, how can I get this one requirement all the way through as untouched by all the other things as possible? Because what I want to do is get it to the other side so I can build a feedback loop. Because what you need to do is you need to shorten that feedback loop. You don't want to lengthen that feedback loop, right? You want to shorten it so and then you get that feedback and you adjust because you're going to need to course correct. You're not going to get everything right. And the other thing is you're not going to get everything done. So
Right.
you might as well get the most important things done by prioritization, right? And then that feedback will help you get it more right. So you'll end up with the right thing out the door. So you need to start thinking one piece flow. How can I get this thing through? How can I get this requirement through? Unfiltered. You start thinking like that, and now you start thinking about the value stream, right? And then thinking about the value stream is only the steps, only the steps to help to create the value. And now you're thinking about the value stream, and now you think about that one piece flow through that value stream, and you're eliminating all the fluff, man, all the fluff. And it also means that you ain't got to have every single requirement completely flushed out in the very beginning.
Mm.
You could
Yeah.
think about doing sets of work, right?
Yeah, and that's
So
kind
it's,
of where they are. We are doing that. That's exactly what the teams are doing. They're just kind of planning to do sets of work
mhm.
along the way. We'll have some dark releases right along the way, and then instead of having one big release into production, right, we'll turn all that on at one time. But by then, everything would have been tested, tried, and true, and already
Yeah,
gone
but
through.
here's the deal, right? You can turn things on, and it can be, I guess, dark, but it working, right? There's a difference between it being there and working versus you making it available to people, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
the truth is, all real testing happens in production, right? I mean, come on now, let's not pretend, right?
Are you a proponent of there's no such thing as pre-prod? Like everything really, once you
Come
put
on,
it in
man.
containers.
Come on. I mean, you can have as many pre-positives as you want to.
Yeah,
It's tell me what organization, and there's very few that has an exact replica of what's in prod.
agree. I've been up many a nights late. Agree, because something didn't go right. I agree.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's because we have this false sense of whatever it is when you can't test every edge case. You just can't. It's impossible. It's only production that's going to really help you deal with that. And this is where you start dealing with, stop thinking. This is where you start changing the mindset about defects and you start thinking about, does it work as expected? Does it work as designed?
Right.
So, and they're likely going to be thinking in a defect mindset, but it's okay. You can help change that. So I think, Brian, you have an amazing opportunity to get some real dense experience that happens in all kinds of organizations. And if I'm you, I would be looking forward to this, man.
Man, listen. It was a while there. It's funny you say that, bro. It was a while
Hmm.
there where I was like, man, this isn't going right. I was brought in on the third PM on this thing. And then just over the weekend, I said, you know what? I was telling my boss in my one-on-one on my skip level, I said, if I fall, I have no choice with all this complexity to fall, but to fall forward, man. Like
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
have
yeah.
a choice. You know,
Hmm.
I don't have a choice but to fall. It's just so many things, and this is so unique and so not really how things are supposed to be done. But I'm
True,
being exposed to so much, man. It is fun. I'm looking forward to it.
true.
I'm
And
looking
I would say to you, man, I think there's a difference between dense experience and regular experience. Density of experience is something that people don't think about. Somebody that's over here doing a regular project and they're going through regular setting up events, they don't have as dense experience over a year than someone that's had a litany of problems that they've had to solve, that they would have to deal with. And I would say to you, probably the reason why I'm in the position I am today is density of experience. Because in a lot of organizations, they would always put me on the hardest thing in the building. And so now you're being put on the hardest thing in the building. That means you're going to gain dense experience. Like 1 year of experience for you is going to be like 5 years experience for everybody else.
mm,
And so you have to remember the blessing, the advantage you have in this opportunity. And you need to every day go in there looking forward to that new challenge, looking forward to learning, looking forward to growing, looking forward to making sure that your next day isn't the same as the day you had before. That when you make a simple mistake, you find ways to improve it that night. So when you come back, you never make that mistake again. And you got to represent for us. It's not a lot of brothers out there doing this like this, man, on this level.
yeah, it's a blessing. It really. Back in 2020, you afforded me the opportunity. You opened up a spot on a hardship CSM
Yep.
class for me. You may not remember, but you did it. You said I'll open it up. I took the last little bit that I had from settlement. It wasn't the last I had, but
Yeah.
I took it, applied it, took your class, man, and I did not know it was going to be the gateway to go from waterfall to agile. And man, I've been very, very blessed and extremely blessed to be turned on the bearded eagle, to be turned on the Devon Morris, man. You the man, brother. I appreciate
Well,
everything
I'm
you've
I'm gonna
done.
say I'm gonna say it to you like this, man. Each one teach one. We lift as we climb. And what you need to do now is you now need to bring some of the rest of us up, so and then we can have the same experience, or they can have the same experience that you had, right? I do this because I love it, and I want to see you do great things. You don't need to give nothing back to me, but you need to give it back to somebody else.
10-4.
All right, then, brother. I appreciate you, Brian. Let me
Hey,
know what
man.
else you need. All right, I
Yes,
got you,
sir.
dog.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, hey, have a good one.
You too.
All right. Hey, that was great, everybody. That was great. For you all that stayed, look, man, this right here, I'm gonna say this to you the best way that I can. You know, those hardship classes when we did the Black Lives Matter ones, and then we did hardship classes after that. Today we do a 40% off of any class, right? So if you got a hardship, you can let us know. We do a 40% off, right? Those things help. They help. And the reason why I stay doing classes online is because it's cheaper for me to provide the class for you, right? And then you're gonna get an amazing class and I'll make sure you know your stuff, right? So I would say to you all, people that have that, send them to Bearded Eagle, send them my way. I'll make sure that we take care of them, especially if they have a hardship. I want to see more of us involved in this. You know how it goes, but other than that, these are the stories that I'm looking forward to. These are the stories that I don't always get to hear about, right? Somebody came to a hardship class and now it's changed their life in some kind of way just because they had an opportunity. And these are the things where we build nations from. We help, elevate people, right? And I absolutely love it. So on that note, this has made my day. It's actually made my week. So Brian, thank you for coming on and sharing your story. Um, and look, what I'll say to you all is, man, I appreciate you, man. I do this because I love it. And hopefully you all get some value out of it. And we're just gonna keep doing this. We're gonna keep rocking. We're gonna keep making every Monday night at 8 happen. Who shows up is who show up. Who don't, they just missing out on greatness. And so you all make sure you enjoy the rest of your week. I'll, Many of you have trained with me, so don't embarrass me on the street, right? Don't embarrass us on the street, right? Go out there and represent. Make this thing happen. Make us all look good. Enjoy this Scrum game. Enjoy the Scrum journey as best you can. On that note, y'all, I'm gonna say, hey, peace. This has been a great one, and I'll see you next week. Same time, same place. Hey, have a good night.